Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the SERMAPod. This is the podcast for the Sports and Entertainment Risk Management Alliance. I am the host of the SERMAPod. I'm also the founder and CEO, Rich Lenkov. Very happy to see everyone as we enter our next 100 episodes. We're well into our next 100. We're very proud to present this great content. And we're all coming off one of the greatest sporting events in history. I feel like Trump, one of the greatest of anywhere in the world. But it truly was a historic sporting event. Really, I think it was the most successful one ever. I attended Canada games. I'm from Canada, so I attended games with my son in both Houston and Vancouver, and really a huge endeavor. It was called, I think, a Super Bowl in each city. And to get into that a little bit and talk about some of the challenges from a legal, insurance, risk, and claims perspective, we're really fortunate to have David Seifer. David is the corporate and finance practice group leader at Bilzin Sumberg. He is also, very relevantly, was lead counsel, perhaps continues to be lead counsel to the Miami host committee for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. David, welcome to the SERMAPod.
Thanks. Glad to be here, Rich. Appreciate that warm introduction.
So I start by saying you were, but undoubtedly, as we all know, there is a long trail to any large event. I'm sure that you continue to counsel the host committee on a number of issues, even though the event has now passed. But let's start by talking a little bit about the background and how you got into this role. Have you ever worked on a sporting event like this before?
I would have to say that I don't think anyone has ever worked on a sporting event like this before, right? Starting just back on what is it? It's the largest World Cup that's ever been thrown. It was the first time the tournament's been expanded to the larger field. It's the first time the tournament's been in 3 different countries. And navigating all of that has been a ton of different things. Similar to a Super Bowl in each city, with the 7 matches in Miami, technically it's 7 Super Bowls in the city. Over the course of a month, with a lot of things going on. But background in terms of how I got involved and how our firm got involved in this type of thing, barring the concept that this event is larger than anything else I think anyone has dealt with, that we have done this. So we frequently work with the Miami Dolphins and the stadium. We do the Formula One work. We do the work for the stadium and the course down here for Formula One in Miami. We also have done work with other local professional teams, pretty much all of them, some work. And we've done everything from government affairs, litigation, corporate. So we do have extensive reputation of being involved in when the biggest of the best events come down here. We're very frequently counsel for those things.
So how early in the process did you and your firm get involved?
So we got involved after the host committee actually picked up steam, which would be about 2.5, 3 years ago. Even though the bid was from 7 or 8 years ago, we were involved, and the host committee entity was set up at that point in time to actually do the bid with FIFA. The actual come to life of there are now things to actually do was about 3 years ago when we started to become involved.
Okay. And explain to us kind of what the initial work was. Like, what are you doing 3 years prior to the event starting to, get into the nitty gritty of it?
Right. So it was ranging the whole gamut of what does a full service law firm do? And some of it actually was really, also business consigliere style advising, but that goes hand in hand with what we do as commercial lawyers. But some of the initial stuff had to do with first ensuring the appropriate tax status of the entity. What type of nonprofit entity should you be? There's lots of different types of them, and making sure that you receive the appropriate, acceptance letter from the IRS for that. Making sure the corporate governance structure is set up correctly for the entity, which means a couple things. It means making sure that when you hire employees, they have appropriate employment agreements. When you're adding members to your board of directors, making sure that they've been duly appointed also. And then making sure all the organizational documents of the entity are in place to handle that type of governance. And because of the way these things typically work, you want to make sure that the governance is set up in a manner that allows for expeditious decision-making on most things, and not having to come back to a large board of directors of people, many of whom are dignitaries, frankly, to be able to implement your game plan. So there is a particular strategy as to how you set up these host committees governance. And then we jumped into contracting also. There's commercialization contracting, and then there's the biggest and most bold of everything we had to get done on the long lead item, which was negotiating the host city rights agreement against FIFA. That was the most time consuming of anything we've done. But all those things are what do you start doing about 3 years in advance.
All right. So are you working? I mean, you're reporting directly to the Miami host committee, correct?
Yes, my team and I work with them literally every day, and we're glad to have been so embedded with them very well, and they were gracious enough to continue to invite our team and me to participate in all board of directors meetings, all executive committee meetings, and notwithstanding that we are not employed by the host committee, we've been involved in every major stake meeting like that for sure. Yes.
So Miami was one of 11 host cities. Are you coordinating with other committees, or is everyone kind of a standalone operation?
Everyone is a standalone operation for sure, but there are meetings of different cohorts in order to ensure that people are using synergistic practices across the country to make sure things are being done. If you find that this is an easier way of doing something or a more efficient way of doing something, then you want to do that. So I'm aware that I know the host committees had set up different things, like there was a security task force and a business task force and a transport task force and legal also. I mean, there were all sorts of different things across, but those met, some very infrequently and others more regularly.
So, David, on our podcast, we like to take our listeners or viewers behind the scenes, see
Mhm.
what it's really like. Things that we don't normally see. Everyone on this Zoom, everyone watching this or listening to this has been in endless meetings where lots of competing personalities, lots of competing time pressures, etc. I can only imagine what these meetings were like, given FIFA involvement, the host country, security, police force, military, intelligence, legal. I mean, how is it even? How are you even scheduling these meetings and navigating them? Who's taking the leadership? I mean, walk us through that a little bit behind the scenes if you can.
Yeah, sure. You've definitely pointed out a lot of the correct stakeholders, and even to add on top of that, right, is the stadium authority is typically different, and then
Right.
all the different governmental, local, and county and state organizations. But yeah, so we were very grateful in our host committee to have great leadership on the business side and the board side. The two co-chairs of the committee from the board side were Rodney Barreto and Bo Ferrari, both of whom were super, super helpful and did great things in terms of leadership. And similarly, on the management team, the CEO, Alina Hudak, and the COO of the host committee, also Ray Martinez, had done a fantastic job, and their level of experience was tremendous. For example, the CEO had previously been the city manager for the beach and county manager for the county, and I believe both those things. And then the COO had chaired two of the 7 Super Bowls that have been in Miami before. So we had a very deep bench of experience between them, and then the two, Rodney and Bo, who were the co-chairs of the thing. And so their ability to juggle lots of very serious things all at the same time are skills that they already had from either from dealing with government or dealing with these large events or what their business jobs have been historically. So we were thankful to have great teams like that, and to then just embed along with them on everything that needed legal assistance or counsel on. We just would try to make sure we had the right team there, whether it was the corporate people, the commercialization people, governance people, tax, government affairs, real estate leasing. I mean, it was a lot of things, but all the constituency groups that you name were certainly involved in this, and there is a lot to do. It's all of those things. It's just meeting and meeting and meeting and meeting, and then negotiate and draft also from the lawyer side too. But all those things are true. And the run up to it, I do want to point out, because it may be one of your later questions, is the difference between the speed at which things moved in the 2.5 years preceding the event contrasted against what happened in the last 6 months is a dramatic difference of speed and intensity in terms of when everyone comes out of the woodwork to realize it's really here.
Yeah, there's no putting that off to tomorrow at some point. Um, Listen, these events were staged during a war, right? A military crisis
Mhm.
that's happening. At least one. There's actually a couple going on. When you are assessing risk and exposure from a geopolitical perspective, from a potential terrorist threat perspective, all of those kind of things, it's one thing to plan that 3 years in advance. How much are you keeping up on what's going on in these different parts of the world that may pose a risk and danger to your event? You have to do that up to the literally kickoff, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's
I
an
mean, it's
ever evolving thing.
all the way through the end of the fan fest and through the last game. It's all of the above things, and it covers everything from the fan fest to transportation to the stadium facility, the perimeters. There's like 4 perimeters around the stadium, but there was a lot of that, and I would say again, thankfully for our host city, one of the 2 co-chairs of the executive board as well as the COO of the team, we're both, I believe, former police chiefs down here. So we have deep and broad experience with these types of things. And we're also thankful for the White House task force and what they did to help all of the different host cities in the United States, and the hundreds of millions of dollars that the federal, the Trump administration and specifically Andrew Giuliani's office as the White House task force for the World Cup, we were able to put up to help subsidize or frankly reimburse a lot of the things that were being done, because without that type of support from the federal government, the implementation of the security plans at all levels and in all locations would not have been possible. There would have been no way to raise that type of money from local governments and local businesses.
David, you mentioned the negotiations with FIFA. You negotiated a FIFA rights agreement for over a year.
Yes.
Was there one clause that you fought hardest to get right, or something that you found maybe a little surprising that it was so difficult? Or bring us inside that.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of legal jargon, I'll start with the stuff no one wants to hear is that, the attorney-client privilege on that makes me not be able to answer a lot of that question. But the business side of it would be that, the understanding that this is the first time that FIFA has ever rolled out this type of a commercial rights program. And, I would say the previous 2, right, or even 3, right, Brazil, Russia, Qatar. I mean, dealing with Russia and Qatar are different things. You're dealing with essentially one person is making all of the decisions on those things. But coming here, they tried to roll out something different, and what they did, which I believe at FIFA was handled by Aubrey Walton, who did a fantastic job, and she's down here in their Coral Gables office in Miami. Aubrey's fantastic, but the rollout of that program was the first ever to try to see, could they actually give these types of rights to then allow these types of things to happen? And so it was novel for FIFA. It was novel for everybody that was involved in it. And so while FIFA does what FIFA does, right? They are FIFA and they have a very large organization and a large money making event, and they are the 900-pound gorilla or the giant elephant in the room, but they're kind of more like about 10 or 15 elephants or 10 or 15 gorillas. So it's a little bit different in terms of how it actually plays out. But the implementation of those things, it's just all typical things you would think about, right? Is that how do the rights work? Who owns them? Who's allowed to use them? How can they use them? What do they have to pay for them? And then what happens if things go wrong? Who's responsible for those things? What happens if there's issues with infringement, misappropriation? What happens if there's physical damage? What happens if there's all of these different things? Um, and what about taxes? It's mundane stuff like that too. But the implementation of the whole thing was novel, both on the business side and the legal side. And so really it was it was an interesting and long process, I think, for a number of the host cities. Some were much quicker than others, but it was a long process with the types of issues I just mentioned as the keynote things to really be addressed.
Back to security. So obviously, security is of paramount importance when you're staging a large event like this, particularly given what's going on right now, like we mentioned, and particularly, in your host stadium, there have been some, a couple of incidents in the past. I can't think of any major incidents that came out of the World Cup in any of the host cities, which is a testament, obviously, to excellent planning and execution by people like you. So, talk to us a little bit about how that went down. Did it meet, exceed expectations, and what takeaways can our listeners and viewers have with regards to keeping an event safe like this that were successfully implemented in Miami?
Yeah, look, I would have to say, and again, my knowledge of the exact numbers is certainly is imprecise. So I'm just I know as a generalization, for example, our Fan Fest, which was I think one of the highest attended by fans of Fan Fest in the country, as well as one of the longest, as well as definitively had the most commercial affiliates and corporate sponsors in attendance. I think over 600,000 fans came through Fan Fest over 24 days. I think we had 4 or 5 days where we were over 35,000 fans per time. The stadium each day was sold out, around 65,000 people, 7 games. So that's another 450,000. So we had 1 million people coming through the combination of FanFest plus the stadium, which is it's an enormous number. Um, and I think the incident level in terms of situations, ejections, and arrests were you know, teeny. I believe the combined number is way under 100, and I think it's even under 50. I mean, it was teeny number compared to 1 million people being passing through FanFest in a stadium. And I think the way that that's done is good planning, right, in terms of how security perimeters are implemented and physical planning. I think the use of you know barricades, Disney World style methods of how to get into the locations and standing in lines, metal detectors, ensuring that there's adequate number of and adequately trained level of enforcement personnel deployed, whether it's private security or police, and ensuring that they're in the right spot. And I think that all these things combined come with just a ton of advanced planning. And I know that the host committees, as well as the government and FIFA, did have task force specifically and met very frequently on this topic to make sure that implementation occurred. But at the same time, you got to understand it's a sports game, and people are enthusiastic, and as they are going to concerts are enthusiastic too. But when you have a well laid out plan, both on personnel as well as physical things, I think that type of mitigation really gets you where you need to get. And again, I think a testament to the 600,000 people coming through the Fan Fest and the almost 500,000 people coming through the stadium, to have that teeny number of issues, ejections, or arrests is just a testament to how well everybody did to pre-plan that type of stuff.
It really is. And I mean, it's just a remarkable statistic. And I don't think people have got their heads around it yet. And probably most people don't think of it except for geeks like us and people who are listening. But I mean, it's a really remarkable statistic given how many people literally were just physically on the ground. So
Yeah.
it's a real testament, like you said, to you and others who were involved in that. Um,
Yeah, people may have
but
had to stand in line a little bit longer, but it paid off in the end in terms of a higher enjoyment factor for the attendance at the events themselves.
Yeah, for sure. What about insurance? I mean, for an event of this size, what does the insurance picture even look like? I mean, I assume it's not just a single policy. There's probably
Yeah.
dozens of individual policies dealing with every type of risk.
Yeah, the policies are so large that they're very expensive, and everybody requires something different, right? FIFA requires certain things, which are enormous numbers. Governments require big numbers also, and some of that stuff, can be acquired and maintained. It's just extremely expensive. And then, similar to the extent that you need to downstream that to any of your sponsors or vendors, whether it's the FIFA requirements or the local government or the federal government requires, sometimes these requirements are too large for small businesses, and that's an actually interesting thing that we fought hard about, and had some good outcomes, but yeah, the policies were large, and I think that the economical way to even have to do it was really to have a giant company and broker come through and look at risk shared across all of the different locations, because on a one-off basis, having discrete policies at these levels, the numbers were enormous for premiums.
David, thanks so much for joining us. I got one last question. Aside from what we've talked about, which is, the obvious answer of prepare as much in advance as possible. What is one takeaway that our listeners and viewers could learn from you in staging, whether it's a small event for, a few dozen people or a World Cup event? What could our listeners and viewers take from your successful work on the Miami FIFA games?
Yeah, I think really what you said though is the main point, right? Is plan early, get people involved early who are experts in their field to make sure what you're doing is setting the right path for what you do later. That's certainly the number one thing. But I guess another thing to do would be have a great team of people around you that understand, and leadership that understand that having finance and accounting people involved and risk management people involved and lawyers and security and ops, and everybody needs to be involved together and sharing information so that when everybody moves together in their separate silo or channel to get their job done, it's done cohesively, and everybody comes out with the best finished product, because all the teams don't just work together going forward in their own column, but they also work together across, understanding what each other are doing. And I think the communication amongst groups, and not siloing things is extremely important, because then it allows for us on the legal side, for example, to then deal with multiple faceted issues in one SWAT, because we know what's going on everywhere. Similarly, the risk people, the ops people, the finance people, the government affairs people know the same thing. By having good cross communication and people that are willing to be involved, for the good of the project, as opposed to pushing only in their own channel or what might be best for their channel by itself. So I think cross departmental discussion is critical also, because it impacts literally every single element of what you're doing to implement.
It's a great lesson. I said my real last question is this. In 20 years, what will you look back on with this experience? And what's the one moment that really stood out? I'm sure there are hundreds and hundreds of moments, but, being on the ground, I assume you had access that many of us did. And you were working, presumably, some of these games, but also enjoying yourself. Give us one moment that would really wow most of us lay people who were not didn't have the access that you did.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would say that, this is the time where I got to meld together my professional life with one of my passionate hobbies, and I've followed international soccer my entire life. I had attended all 5 games in Orlando in 1994.
Oh, wow.
I attended all 7 here in Miami. I went to all the events here. So I did have some good access through the host committee, but I did have my own seats though, separately. But yeah, I mean, things that we saw is, I mean, going to events where you have the ability, and again, noting again that I really love international soccer, but going to events where I have the ability to meet Ronaldinho from Brazil, or have a discussion with Johnny Infantino. Those are great, and it's not it's the ability not just to be in the crowd as a fan, but frankly, what comes with it, as you're saying, is the ability to be in the green room, or to be at a dinner, or to be at an event where these people are going to be. Was a lot of fun, and I do have to say that I enjoyed my conversations with, actually singular conversation with Gianni Infantino. I thought it was very nice and interesting, and then again, I really enjoyed meeting celebrity soccer players, as well as celebrities from the community and the country, as they came through, and it was a lot of fun. But I do have to say, if I was to take a specific moment, it would have to be literal game highlights, which I know is not what you want to hear. But seeing down here, I think the Athletic actually ranked the top games in terms of interestingness and excitement. And when they ranked 104 games, the top 2 games were 2 of the Miami games, the Cabo Verde Argentina game, as well as
Incredible.
a 10-goal third place game between France and Norway. And having attended those 2 games, they were both spectacular, high intensity, incredible things. And I'd have to say, as being a fan, that was the best. But certainly meeting celebrities behind the scenes was a lot of fun too.
Well, anyone who says that they should do away with that third place game obviously didn't watch. Yeah, that game was incredible. Lots of scoring, a lot of fun. Well, David Seifer, thank you so much for joining us and giving us some insight into the successful management of the FIFA Miami games. You are with Bilzin Sumberg, notably the smallest by a large margin of any law firm who worked on any of these host committees. So big shout out to the smaller firms of the world. We could do that kind of work too, right?
I appreciate that, and that's we noticed the same thing, and I hope that that's a testament to the quality of work that we do, as well as the stature and depth we have here in the community here in South Florida. And we too noticed the same thing, and I appreciate you bringing that up. But Bilzin Sumberg and our firm, we're super proud to be a longtime Miami firm, and super pleased to be involved at worldwide, global, big events like this, and certainly play with all the other big players in the sandbox.
Well, congrats again. Thank you so much for joining us on the SERMAPod, and please come back in the future.
Indeed, my pleasure.